one thing I learned was that as an entrepreneur, you have to be incredibly open to opportunities. And you have to be the sort of person who says why not rather than why when one of those opportunities come along. We started with a business plan, but it actually became confetti within about a couple of months, because we literally didn't know where the business was going to go, because our chocolate was the first of its kind, the first organic chocolate in the world. So we could have stayed small with a niche in the natural food industry. And actually, that's what I certainly anticipated. But one day I'm sitting at my desk with my two phones, and the phone rings, and it's the Sainsbury's buyer. And he told me that one of his directors had our chocolate at a dinner party, and would I please submit it for their next product review. So I went home and I said to Craig what had happened, and he went, no, it doesn't happen like that. You go knocking on their door for a couple of years, and eventually maybe it opens. But in fact, it did happen like that, and it happened because actually it wasn't a director, it was Lady Sainsbury who nagged her husband. But it got us into Sainsbury's, and the fantastic thing at that time was every supermarket wanted to be Sainsbury's, and so before we knew it, we were in Waitrose and we were in Safeway too. Now I have to say that everything that the Green and Blacks, and in fact everything I've ever done, has been shaped by my experience, not as a business person, but as a consumer. You are looking at somebody who has 6 O-levels and a secretarial diploma. But I have, over the years, as my bank manager will tell you, spent a huge amount of time and money staying in nice hotels, eating in good restaurants, seeking out delicious food halls, hanging out in hip cafes, etc. And I have always, almost forensically, analysed and made a mental note about what I did or didn't like about that place or that experience or that product. And it might be my journalistic training, because actually as a journalist you're always on the outside, slightly looking in, but it has paid dividends. So we have fantastic customer loyalty at Green and Blacks today. I think that's reflected by the number of you sitting here today, actually. And it's not because we just offer fantastic, unquestioning customer service. It's also because we're transparent about how we do business. Because at the heart of Green and Blacks, as I say, are those ethical principles. And we didn't set out to be ethical. It was just naturally the way we did business. Back when we started, corporate social responsibility was not a phrase that was in common parlance. But today, more and more customers are looking for brands which have real values. And customers want to know more than ever before about the ethical environmental credentials of a product. Was it produced with slave labour? Is it eco-friendly? Is the packaging recycled or recyclable? Is there just too much of that packaging in the first place? And those are the sort of questions that business people are going to have to answer more and more, because companies' ethics really are now a deciding factor when people make purchasing decisions. As a brand, we can now afford lots of advertising, glossy advertising, see it all over the place. But I would say that for the first 8 years of the brand, we didn't spend 1 penny on advertising, because we felt that there were far more effective ways to spend what was an incredibly slender promotional budget. We actually had a joke at Green and Blacks, which was the first bar is free, because we gave away literally tons and tons of chocolate in squares and bars. We did that rather than spend money on advertising, because you can watch an awful lot of money trickle through your fingers with paid-for advertising. So instead we put all of that budget towards getting chocolate into people's mouths, rather as we have done today. Because we were completely confident that when it melted on people's taste buds, it was going to trigger a lifelong passion. And then we printed information about the ethical and environmental message that we had on the inside of the packaging. I'd had a light bulb moment one day where I was unwrapping a bar, and I suddenly noticed that we had 28 square inches of white paper to use to spread our message. So we did just that. And we did consumer shows, we did food events, we did green fairs, we had a fair trade garden at the Hampton Court Flower Show, in a garden that was co-sponsored by Christian Aid, who were great supporters of the fair trade mark from the word go, and they flew in some cocoa trees especially, and I stood there in a little straw hat breaking up chocolate, getting RSI. We did in-store tastings. Eventually we got our chocolate into first class on British Airways and on Eurostar, and actually we never made any money out of that, but it really didn't matter, because as far as were concerned, those were our perfect target customers. And over the past 18 years we've given away something like £3 million worth of chocolate, but it was the best investment in our future that we could possibly make. The other important thing was networking the chocolate among chefs and foodies, which stood us in really good stead with our next promotional thrust, which was a recipe leaflet. We did that quite early on. When we launched, there was no 70% chocolate on the market. That's now become the kind of benchmark of quality for anybody who cooks with. We realized very early on that many of our customers were not just nibbling the bar, they were actually using the chocolate to make cakes and pastries and biscuits and even Mexican mole sauces, etc. So we produced a really glossy, stylish leaflet for which I blagged recipes from just about anybody I could think of. So we had Linda McCartney's brownie recipe, we had the Groucho Club's chocolate pudding, we had Hugh Fernley Whittingstall's Maya Gold mousse, long before the River Cottage got the nation salivating. So, and again, over the years, we distributed a huge number of those leaflets, about 500,000 of them, because once again, giving something away for nothing builds huge goodwill. We used some of the recipes in the first Green and Black's cookbook, which went on to sell 500,000 copies. And we're now working on a second cookbook. And the list of people who have gladly given their recipes for free because they're fans of Green and Black's, it sort of reads like a copy of Hello magazine. But there came a stage at the end of the 90s when we were growing so fast and our finances were so precarious that we realized that if we wanted to grow more, we had to take in investment. And that was done in several stages. We were courted by several potential investors, but the ones that we decided to go with actually were the people that we felt was the best fit. And they had previously invested in the new Covent Garden Soup Company, which many of you may know. They'd taken it from a £2 million a year brand to a £22 million a year brand, and they'd sold it for £28 million. And we both felt that there were real parallels with Green and Black's, because although the new Covent Garden Soup Company soups were widely available, they were what I call it a discovery brand, like Green and Black's. People still felt that it was their secret discovery, and were hugely devoted to it. So what we did, we took a package of some cash, which helped us sleep at night after the aforementioned long dark nights of the soul, which I think is inevitable if you're trying to grow a business at 100% a year. And we took some shares, and we knew that ultimately the brand would be sold on one day. And at that stage, we would have no control. And I remember crying myself to sleep on more than one occasion in the month after we'd sold to the private equity investors, because I didn't like what the new marketing director was doing. And my husband, who is a very, very wise man, said to me, "Honey, you can either have the control or the money." And I have to say that helped get everything back in proportion after all those sleepless nights.